So tonight we're going to make chowda. I am a big soup lover. It's a one-pot meal where you can get in a lot of vegetables. You can put beans, grains. You can really just about put anything in a soup or a stew. So we're going to start with ingredients you should always have in your fridge, which are celery, carrots, onions, garlic, and then I'm a big fan of always having potatoes around. If they start to sprout, you can throw them in the fridge to slow down the process. But mine usually don't make it that long because I like to have them baked, have them in soups, make potato chips. And then you should also always have frozen vegetables. So tonight I'm going to have some fresh kale that I'm going to throw in my chowder because I have some left over from a kale salad I made from the farmer's market. But you can use frozen kale or frozen spinach. I love having frozen corn always in the fridge to make my miso corn butter, which is also on my website. And then another thing to always have is a good selection of dried herbs and spices. Tonight we're going to use some thyme, some rosemary. I always have these on hand, some bay leaf. I happen to really, really love herbes de Provence. So I'm going to put a little bit of that in, which actually has thyme and rosemary in it. And then I always have a gazillion kinds of miso. This is a low sodium yellow miso. You can have a white miso or a chickpea miso. It keeps for a long time in the fridge and adds a lot of umami flavor to your dishes, particularly this chowda. And then for a chowda, we want it to be creamy. My creaminess of choice comes from soaked cashews. If you're on a low-fat diet, you can use pureed beans, like white beans or chickpeas. You could puree a potato, some of the potato that you're using in it to thicken it up. You could use flour. You can use silken tofu. But tonight we're using cashews. So those are your basic ingredients. I happen to have some cauliflower left over from last week that's starting to turn, so I want to use that up. And then to make it a chowda, I actually got some oyster and maitake mushrooms that I'm going to cook with some kelp granules as our faux clam chowda ingredient. Another thing you should always have in your pantry or fridge for this recipe or other recipes are beans. I made a big pot of chickpeas today, so we're going to throw some of those in it. And then if you wanted to, you could put in some cooked farro or some quinoa or some brown rice. I'm not going to put a grain in mine today because we're going to have a nice chowder with a crusty bread that I got at our local, my favorite bakery, Jane. A nice sourdough bread. So that's it. Let's get started. Oh, and one other thing, obviously, you can use water as your base. It's really up to you. If you use water, you might just use a little bit more miso and herbs and spices to get some more flavor. But if you can, keep around some veggie bouillon, either Better Than Bouillon veggie or Edward and Sons or something in your pantry that you can always grab when you need it. So we're going to start with our onion. This is an organic carrot, so I'm not going to bother peeling it. I really don't like to have to peel my vegetables. I typically don't, unless it's a conventional carrot, but I like them chunky. Lulu likes them chunky. Here you go, Lou. Ready? And then I had this like end of a celery bunch, so I'm going to just use the whole thing. You know, you can use the leaves as well as the stalks. And then I'm going to puree part of it, so it's going to be nice and creamy too. Okay, and then we'll get our potatoes ready while we're sauteing our vegetables. So we're going to start by sauteing our mirepoix, our carrot, celery, and onion, and then we're going to add our garlic. And I'm going to go ahead and do this oil-free. If you were using olive oil, you'd put a little bit in now, but I'm not going to bother. And we just want it to soften a little bit. If it starts sticking to the pan, we'll drizzle in a little bit of our vegetable broth. And while we're cooking our mirepoix, I'm going to go ahead and get our potatoes and our cauliflower ready to add in just a little bit. These potatoes are pretty small. I don't bother peeling the potatoes. I like the skin. They're organic russets. You can peel them. You can partially peel them. It's up to you, but the skins are good for you, so why not leave them? And those are going to be ready for when we add our broth. Okay, so now I'm going to add, I love herb de Provence. You could use some mixed Italian seasoning. I really like the combination of the thyme and rosemary. Has a little bit of lavender and marjoram, but I really love thyme in a chowder, so I'm going to put a little extra thyme. We all could use a little extra thyme. And I'm going to put a little extra rosemary too. I love rosemary. Oh, and I've got my bay leaves. I've got a couple of bay leaves here. You just want to remember to fish these out before you puree your soup. And it wouldn't be awful if you did. It's just going to, you don't want it to be too strong of a flavor. Give that a stir. And you can smell the fragrant herbs with the carrots and the celery. Okay, now, this is so easy. We're going to add our broth. And I've got about 6 cups here. And we're going to bring that to a boil with our cauliflower and our potatoes. And we're just going to simmer it until the potatoes and cauliflower are fork tender. This piece is a little big. Oh, it didn't break apart. The liquid is just about covering the vegetables, and there'll still be more room to add other ingredients as soon as that starts cooking. Today I was able to get some lovely oyster mushrooms, which make a great mock clam. So I'm just going to take the hard stem off, and then I'm going to pull these apart, and I'm going to saute them with some kelp. So the kelp flakes give it a nice fishy flavor. If you don't have kelp flakes, you could use a crumbled up sheet of nori, like sushi nori. So I'm just going to break these up. And if they're any big pieces, you can pull them in half or leave them because they're going to shrink a little bit when you cook them. I'm also going to add these maitakes. I couldn't help myself. They had both of them today, so I'm going to go with both of them. Okay, so you're going to get your nonstick skillet heated up, and you can put a little bit of veggie broth in there if you'd like. The mushrooms have a fair amount of liquid, so you probably won't even need it. And we're going to just cook these for a couple of minutes, let them break down, add a little sprinkle of salt. When, again, if you're on a low sodium diet, skip the salt. And if they start to get dry or stick, take a little bit of that veggie broth. I kept some on the side. It's like I got a piece of onion stem in. And you can just add a little bit to stop them from sticking. When they start to soften, they're already starting to soften. I'm going to take some of my kelp. Again, you could use dulse or nori. I really like kelp. Gives it a nice sort of fishy flavor. Got a really great source of iodine for you. And it gives it that mock clam chowder flavor. I'm going to check on my pot of soup while these are cooking. Okay, so my vegetables have come to a boil, and I'm going to let those simmer probably only about 10 minutes. I'll check them in about 8 minutes until their potatoes and the cauliflower are fork tender. And then I'm going to add some frozen corn. I didn't even have corn last week, so I didn't put corn in it, but I have some frozen corn this week, so I'm going to throw it in. And I'm also going to add my garbanzo beans. You can use white beans, any kind of beans really. I like a lighter bean for a chowda. And we're going to finish it with our mushrooms and our kale and some miso. And then we're going to eat. So in the summertime, I get fresh corn on the cob and I cut it into the soup. But I have some frozen corn, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. My potatoes and my cauliflower is starting to get soft. So we just want to cook this another minute or two to get the corn defrosted and cooked a little bit. We can go ahead and add our garbanzo beans or our white beans or whatever beans you're using. Whatever beans you've got in your pantry. And then while this is simmering, I'm going to go ahead and take those cashews I soaked with a little vegetable broth. I'm going to puree this because it's going to be our cream for our chowda. And actually, since we're going to be adding miso to it, you don't really want to cook your miso. Miso's better if you put it in at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and puree it with my cashews. So I'm going to take, I don't know, about a tablespoon of miso and my cashews. I'm going to blend these together. And when my vegetables are just about ready, I'm going to add them in. Added it. So now would be a good time to fish out those bay leaves. I'm going to go ahead and take those out. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the cream. Turn this down a little. I'm going to have to use a little broth to get it out. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? So I was planning to take a little bit of my vegetable ingredients and puree them to make this partially creamy. You could use an immersion blender as well if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and just puree some of it. So you can see I still have plenty of veggies that are in nice big chunks in here. And then I'm going to puree some into my soup. So it's got that nice thickness to it that a chowda should have. I'll add that to our soup. And then I have some leftover kale from a salad I made. If you didn't have greens, you could just eat this as is. I always love to add some green leafies in with my soups. So we'll go ahead and just let those wilt in there. And I just tore these into bite-sized pieces. So this soup is just about ready. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let it simmer for just a couple minutes, let all those flavors blend, but we're going to add our mushrooms, which are our clams. So good. And then, of course, we want to have a little crushed black pepper. All right, this soup is ready. Take a little bit out. Give it a taste. So good. Make the soup, it's so easy.